In the opulent halls of Ravenshollow Palace, where golden chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors, a scandal was brewing that would shake the very foundation of the monarchy. What began as whispered rumors in the servants' quarters would soon explode into a crisis that threatened to destroy centuries of royal tradition. Behind closed doors, alliances were crumbling, secrets were surfacing, and two of the most powerful women in the kingdom were about to collide in a battle that would determine the future of the crown itself. The morning mist hung heavy over the grounds of Ravenshollow Palace as Lady Camilla Westshire stepped out of her silver Bentley, her emerald dress flowing gracefully in the autumn breeze. At 58, she possessed the kind of refined elegance that commanded respect in every room she entered. Her marriage to Prince Frederick had elevated her from minor nobility to one of the most influential women in the kingdom, but, today, something felt different. As she walked through the palace's grand entrance, the usual warmth from the staff seemed notably absent. Footmen who typically bowed with genuine smiles now offered perfunctory nods. Maids who once exchanged pleasant greetings hurried past with lowered eyes. The change was subtle but unmistakable, and Lady Camilla's instincts told her that trouble was brewing. Queen and Catherine Victoria sat in her private study, surrounded by towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes chronicling centuries of royal history. At 73, she remained formidable, her silver hair perfectly arranged and her steel blue eyes as sharp as ever. The morning newspapers lay scattered across her mahogany desk, each headline more damaging than the last. "Your Majesty," announced her private secretary, Lord Pemberton, as he entered with a silver tray bearing her morning tea. "Lady Westshire has arrived for your scheduled meeting." The Queen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The meeting had been arranged weeks ago to discuss upcoming charity events, but recent developments had transformed what should have been a routine discussion into something far more significant. "Very well," Queen Anne replied, her voice carrying the weight of decades of royal authority. "Show her in." When Lady Camilla entered the study, the tension in the room was immediately palpable. Both women had navigated royal protocol for years, but today felt different. The usual pleasantries were exchanged with mechanical precision, each word carefully measured. "Please, sit," the Queen gestured to an ornate chair across from her desk. "I trust you've seen the morning papers?" Lady Camilla settled gracefully into her seat, her expression remaining composed despite the storm she knew was coming. "I have, Your Majesty. Though I must say, the accuracy of such publications has always been questionable." The Queen picked up a newspaper from her desk, her fingers gripping it with barely contained tension. The headline read, "Royal Foundation Funds Allegedly Misappropriated, Investigation Launched." Below it, a smaller headline whispered, "Palace sources question Lady Westshire's role." "Questionable accuracy," Queen Anne repeated slowly. Yet these particular allegations come with rather substantial documentation. The Royal Foundation for Children's Welfare had been Lady Camilla's primary focus for nearly a decade. Under her leadership, the foundation had grown from a modest charitable organization into one of the kingdom's most influential philanthropic entities. Millions of pounds had been raised, countless children had been helped, and Lady Camilla's reputation as a dedicated humanitarian had become unshakable. Or so it had seemed. 3 weeks earlier, Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, the foundation's longtime treasurer, had approached the Queen's private secretary with concerns about financial irregularities. What he presented was a carefully documented trail of transactions that appeared to show foundation funds being diverted to personal accounts linked to Lady Camilla's inner circle. "I've dedicated 10 years of my life to that foundation," Lady Camilla said, her voice steady but her eyes flashing with controlled anger. "Every decision I've made has been in the best interest of the children we serve." "I don't doubt your intentions," the Queen replied. "However, intentions matter little when faced with such serious allegations. The foundation handles over £30 million annually. If even a fraction has been misappropriated, the implications hung in the air between them. A financial scandal involving the royal family would be devastating, but a scandal involving charity funds meant for disadvantaged children would be catastrophic. The monarchy's reputation, already fragile in an era of increasing Republican sentiment, could not survive such a blow." Lady Camilla leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on a more urgent tone. "Your Majesty, I believe someone is deliberately trying to destroy my reputation and, by extension, damage the royal family." These allegations are not just false, they're strategically designed to cause maximum harm.
Explain.
The timing is too convenient, Lady Camilla began, her mind working quickly to connect the pieces she'd been analyzing for days. These accusations surface just as Parliament is debating the new transparency laws for royal finances.
Someone wants to use this scandal to force even stricter oversight of all royal activities.
Queen Anne's expression remained neutral, but Lady Camilla could see the wheels turning behind those sharp blue eyes. The Queen had survived 73 years in the public eye and 45 years on the throne by being exceptionally skilled at reading people and situations. She knew when someone was lying, and she also knew when someone was being set up. Who would have both the access and the motivation to orchestrate such a scheme, the Queen asked.
Lady Camilla hesitated.
What she was about to suggest would sound like the paranoid ramblings of a desperate woman, but she believed it was the truth.
I think it's someone very close to the royal family.
Someone with intimate knowledge of our procedures and finances. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an ancient grandfather clock in the corner. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows of the study, and, somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the hour. You're suggesting treachery from within our own circle, the Queen said finally. I'm suggesting that someone is willing to sacrifice me to achieve a larger goal. The question is whether the goal is the destruction of the monarchy itself or simply a reorganization of power within it. Before the Queen could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. Lord Pemberton entered without waiting for permission, his usually composed demeanor clearly shaken.
Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but there's been a development.
The police have just arrived at the palace.
They have a warrant.
The words hit the room like a physical blow. Lady Camilla felt the color drain from her face as the full implications became clear. This was no longer a private royal matter to be handled discreetly. The investigation had moved into the public sphere, and there would be no containing it now. Queen Anne stood slowly, her regal bearing never wavering despite the crisis engulfing her family.
A warrant for what, precisely?
To search Lady Westshire's office and residences, Your Majesty. They also wish to interview her regarding the Foundation allegations. Lady Camilla rose from her chair, her mind racing. She knew that somewhere in the palace, investigators were already beginning to tear apart her life's work, searching for evidence of crimes she hadn't committed. Her decade of service, her reputation, her marriage, everything was now at risk. I want to cooperate fully, she said, her voice stronger than she felt.
I have nothing to hide.
But, even as she spoke those words, Lady Camilla knew that innocence alone wouldn't be enough to survive what was coming. Someone had planned this attack with precision and patience, and they had chosen their moment carefully. The question was whether she could discover who was behind it before they succeeded in destroying everything she had built. The Queen walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens, where autumn leaves swirled in the wind like the chaos that was about to engulf their lives. Lady Westshire, she said without turning around, I suggest you prepare yourself.
This is only the beginning.
As if summoned by her words, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The investigators had arrived, and, with them came the beginning of a scandal that would test the very limits of royal power and protocol. Lady Camilla straightened her shoulders, drawing on every ounce of aristocratic training she possessed. Whatever came next, she would face it with dignity. But, deep in her heart, she knew that her life as she had known it was over. The only question now was whether she could salvage anything from the ruins that someone else had so carefully planned to create. Part 2 Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Mitchell had seen her share of high-profile cases during her 20-year career with the Metropolitan Police, but, as she walked through the marble corridors of Ravenshollow Palace, she couldn't shake the feeling that this investigation would define her legacy. The evidence against Lady Camilla Westshire appeared substantial, but something about the case bothered her professional instincts. The financial records are quite damning, said Detective Sergeant James Crawford, her longtime partner, as they approached Lady Camilla's private office. 12 separate transactions totaling nearly £2 million, all diverted from foundation accounts to shell companies. Inspector Mitchell nodded grimly. The preliminary evidence was indeed compelling. Bank records showed a clear pattern of funds being moved from the Royal Foundation for Children's Welfare into accounts belonging to companies that existed only on paper. The paper trail led directly to people within Lady Camilla's inner circle, and, in some cases, to businesses that had provided services to the Westshire family. "Too clean," Mitchell muttered under her breath.
"Ma'am? The evidence. It's almost too perfect, too easy to follow. In my experience, real financial crimes are messy, complicated. This feels like someone wanted us to find exactly what we found."
They entered Lady Camilla's office, a spacious room decorated with photographs from various charity events and awards recognizing her humanitarian work. The walls told the story of a woman who had dedicated her adult life to helping disadvantaged children, making the allegations seem even more shocking. Lady Camilla sat behind her desk, flanked by two of the kingdom's most expensive lawyers. Despite the circumstances, she maintained her composure, answering questions with the precision and grace expected of someone in her position. "Lady Westshire," Inspector Mitchell began, "can you explain your relationship with Meridian Consulting Services?" "I'm not familiar with that company," Lady Camilla replied honestly. "According to our records, Meridian received over £400,000 from the Foundation over the past 18 months. The payments were authorized using your electronic signature." Lady Camilla's lawyers exchanged glances. This was the first they had heard of Meridian Consulting Services, and the surprise on their client's face appeared genuine. "I authorize hundreds of payments each year," Lady Camilla said carefully.
"But I'm not familiar with any company by that name. Could you show me the specific authorizations?"
Inspector Mitchell produced a tablet displaying digital copies of payment authorizations. Each bore Lady Camilla's electronic signature, and the supporting documentation appeared to justify the payments for strategic consulting services and program evaluation. As Lady Camilla examined the documents, her expression grew increasingly troubled. The signatures were indeed hers, but she had no memory of authorizing these specific payments. The supporting documentation mentioned projects and evaluations she had never approved. "Inspector," she said slowly, "these signatures appear to be mine, but I have no recollection of these transactions. The projects mentioned in the supporting documentation are completely unfamiliar to me."
"Are you suggesting someone forged your electronic signature?"
"I'm suggesting that someone with access to our systems may have used my credentials without my knowledge." This was the first crack in what had seemed like an airtight case. Inspector Mitchell had investigated enough white-collar crimes to know that sophisticated financial fraud often involved identity theft and unauthorized access to secure systems. If Lady Camilla was telling the truth, then someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to frame her.
"Who has access to your electronic signature system?"
Detective Sergeant Crawford asked. "The system requires both my password and a physical security token that I keep with me at all times," Lady Camilla replied. "However, my personal assistant, Margaret Thornberry, has administrative access to the Foundation's financial systems. She's worked for me for 8 years and has always been completely trustworthy." Inspector Mitchell made a note to interview Margaret Thornberry immediately. If Lady Camilla was being framed, the investigation needed to expand beyond the obvious suspects. Meanwhile, across the palace, Queen Anne was dealing with the political implications of the unfolding scandal. Prime Minister Robert Ashford had arrived for an emergency meeting, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "Your Majesty, the opposition is already calling for a complete investigation into royal finances," the Prime Minister said as he paced the Queen's private drawing room. "If these allegations prove true, or even if they simply persist in the public consciousness, the damage to the monarchy could be irreversible." Queen Anne remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She had weathered numerous crises during her reign, but this felt different. The accusations against Lady Camilla struck at the heart of the royal family's charitable work, which had been carefully cultivated as proof of their continued relevance to modern society. "What do you recommend?" she asked.
"Distance. Immediately. Lady Westshire should step down from all royal duties pending the investigation. If she's innocent, she can be quietly reinstated later. If she's guilty..."
He left the sentence unfinished.
"And if she's being deliberately targeted to damage the monarchy?"
The Prime Minister paused in his pacing.
"Do you believe that's possible?"
"I believe, Prime Minister, that in 50 years of public life, I've learned to recognize when someone is lying to me.
Lady Camilla's shock at these allegations appears genuine.
That doesn't prove her innocence, but it suggests we may not be dealing with a simple case of embezzlement. Before the Prime Minister could respond, Lord Pemberton entered with urgent news.
Your Majesty, there's been another development.
The media has somehow obtained copies of the financial documents. The evening news will lead with the story. Both the Queen and Prime Minister understood the implications immediately. Once the allegations became public, the pressure for immediate action would become overwhelming. Due process and careful investigation would be replaced by the demand for swift punishment.
How did the media obtain confidential police evidence? The Prime Minister asked.
That, said the Queen grimly, is an excellent question.
Back in Lady Camilla's office, Inspector Mitchell was beginning to piece together a more complex picture.
Margaret Thornberry had indeed had administrative access to the Foundation's systems, but her own financial records showed no unexplained income. More importantly, the timing of the suspicious transactions coincided with periods when Thornberry was on vacation or sick leave. Someone else was using the system during those periods, Crawford observed. Or someone was using Thornberry's credentials remotely, Mitchell replied.
We need to examine the digital forensics more carefully.
Lady Camilla watched the investigation unfold with a growing sense of dread. Even if she was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, the damage to her reputation and the royal family would be lasting. Someone had orchestrated this attack with remarkable sophistication, and they had clearly planned for the investigation process itself to become a weapon.
Inspector Mitchell, Lady Camilla said during a brief break in questioning, may I ask you something off the record?
I can't promise anything will remain off the record, but you may ask.
In your professional opinion, do you believe I'm guilty of these crimes?
Inspector Mitchell studied Lady Camilla's face carefully. After 2 decades of interviewing suspects, she had developed an instinct for deception. What she saw in Lady Camilla's eyes wasn't the calculating defensiveness of someone trying to cover up crimes, but rather the confused fear of someone who genuinely didn't understand what was happening to her. I believe, Mitchell said carefully, that this case is more complicated than it initially appeared. As the afternoon wore on, the investigation expanded beyond Lady Camilla herself. The Foundation's financial systems were analyzed by digital forensics experts, who discovered that someone had indeed accessed the systems using unauthorized methods during the periods when the suspicious transactions occurred. The intrusion was sophisticated, explained Dr. Amanda Foster, the forensic computer expert leading the digital investigation. Whoever did this had intimate knowledge of the Foundation's security protocols and significant technical expertise.
Could it have been done by someone outside the organization? Inspector Mitchell asked.
Possible, but unlikely. The level of access suggests someone with inside knowledge of both the technical systems and the operational procedures. This wasn't a random hacker, this was someone with specific knowledge of how the Foundation operates.
The investigation was revealing a troubling pattern.
The evidence against Lady Camilla was substantial but circumstantial. The real perpetrator had covered their tracks with professional skill, leaving behind just enough evidence to implicate Lady Camilla while ensuring that the true source of the fraud remained hidden. As evening approached, word came that the story had indeed broken in the media. Television news broadcasts led with headlines about royal charity scandal and palace corruption investigation. Lady Camilla's photograph appeared alongside footage of police vehicles at the palace, creating a visual narrative of guilt that would be difficult to overcome regardless of the investigation's outcome. Queen Anne watched the evening news from her private quarters, her expression growing more grim with each sensational report. The media had already declared Lady Camilla guilty, and the pressure for immediate action would be overwhelming.
Your Majesty, Lord Pemberton announced, Lady Westshire requests a private audience.
When Lady Camilla entered the Queen's quarters, she looked exhausted but determined. The day's events had taken their toll, but her resolve remained unshaken. Your Majesty, I know what the evidence suggests, but I swear to you on my honor that I am innocent of these charges. Queen Anne studied the woman who had served the royal family faithfully for over a decade.
I believe you, Camilla.
The question is whether belief is enough to protect either of us from what's coming.
I have a request, Your Majesty. allow me to conduct my own investigation. Give me time to discover who is really behind this before the legal process destroys any chance of learning the truth. The Prime Minister has advised me to distance the royal family from you immediately. And, if you do, whoever orchestrated this attack will have succeeded in their true objective, damaging the monarchy itself. Queen Anne was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that all seemed to lead to unacceptable outcomes. Finally, she spoke. You have 48 hours. If you cannot provide compelling evidence of your innocence by then, I will have no choice but to accept the Prime Minister's recommendation. Lady Camilla nodded grimly. 48 hours to unravel a conspiracy that had been months or perhaps years in the making. It seemed impossible, but it was the only chance she had to save not just her own reputation, but the institution she had served faithfully for so long. As she left the Queen's quarters, Lady Camilla knew that the next 2 days would determine whether justice prevailed or whether a carefully planned attack on the monarchy would succeed in destroying everything she held dear. Part 3. Lady Camilla spent her first night as a suspect poring over Foundation records in her private study, determined to find the inconsistencies that would expose the real perpetrator. By dawn, she had identified several troubling patterns that the police investigation had missed, but she knew that time was running out. Her decades of experience managing the Foundation had taught her to notice details that others might overlook. As she examined the fraudulent transactions more carefully, she began to see subtle signs that pointed to someone with intimate knowledge of the Foundation's operations, someone who knew exactly when she would be away from the office and when security protocols would be most vulnerable to exploitation. Margaret Thornberry arrived at the Foundation offices early, as she had for the past 8 years. Lady Camilla's personal assistant had always been the picture of reliability and discretion, qualities that had made her indispensable to the Foundation's operations. But, this morning, Margaret seemed nervous, her usual composed demeanor replaced by barely concealed anxiety. "Margaret," Lady Camilla called from her office doorway, "could you join me for a moment?" As Margaret entered the office, Lady Camilla noticed subtle changes in her assistant's behavior. The woman who had always maintained perfect eye contact now found excuses to look elsewhere. The hands that had always been steady now trembled slightly as she arranged papers on the desk. "I've been reviewing our security protocols," Lady Camilla began carefully, "and I noticed some irregularities in system access during your vacation periods last year." Margaret's face went pale. I don't understand what you mean." "The Foundation's computer systems show access during times when you were supposed to be away. Did you perhaps log in remotely to handle urgent matters?" "No, my lady. I've never accessed the systems from home." "You specifically instructed that all Foundation business should be handled only from the secure office computers." Lady Camilla leaned forward slightly. "Then, can you explain how your credentials were used to authorize payments during your absence?" Margaret's composure finally cracked. Tears began to flow down her cheeks as she collapsed into the chair across from Lady Camilla's desk. Someone approached me several months ago. They said they were conducting an audit of royal charities for the government. They needed my login credentials to verify our procedures." "Who approached you, Margaret?" "A man named David Sterling. He showed me official identification from the Cabinet Office. He said it was a routine review to ensure transparency in royal finances. He promised that you would never know about the audit unless they found serious problems." Lady Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. The Cabinet Office was indeed responsible for oversight of royal finances, but she had never heard of any David Sterling. "Did you verify his credentials independently?" "He provided a phone number for his supervisor, but, when I called, they confirmed that he was conducting authorized audits." Everything seemed legitimate. "Margaret, I need you to remember every detail of your interactions with this man. The survival of everything we've built here may depend on your memory." As Margaret recounted her meetings with the mysterious David Sterling, a clearer picture began to emerge. The man had been extraordinarily well prepared, with detailed knowledge of the Foundation's operations and genuine-looking credentials. He had specifically requested access during periods when Lady Camilla would be away from the office, claiming that this would ensure an unbiased evaluation. He seemed to know things about the Foundation that only someone with inside access could know, Margaret recalled.
He mentioned specific donors by name, knew about upcoming events that hadn't been publicly announced, and even referenced private conversations you'd had with board members. This information confirmed Lady Camilla's growing suspicion that the attack was being orchestrated by someone within the royal circle, someone with access to private information and the resources to create convincing false credentials. Meanwhile, Inspector Mitchell was conducting her own investigation into David Sterling's identity. What she found was troubling. The credentials Margaret had seen were sophisticated forgeries, and the phone number she had called to verify Sterling's identity belonged to an untraceable mobile phone that had been activated just days before the first contact with Margaret. Whoever David Sterling really is, Detective Sergeant Crawford observed, he put considerable effort into creating a believable false identity. And he had help, Inspector Mitchell replied. The level of detailed information he possessed about the Foundation suggests he was receiving intelligence from someone with intimate knowledge of royal operations. The investigation was beginning to shift focus from Lady Camilla's alleged crimes to the possibility that she was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. But Inspector Mitchell knew that suspicions and theories wouldn't be enough to clear Lady Camilla's name. They needed concrete evidence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Foster, the computer forensics expert, had discovered something unusual in the Foundation's server logs. The unauthorized access to Margaret's credentials hadn't come from outside the palace network, it had originated from within the royal communications system itself. Someone with access to the palace's secure network used Margaret's stolen credentials to commit the fraud, Dr. Foster explained to Inspector Mitchell. The digital fingerprints show that the unauthorized transactions were initiated from a computer terminal within the royal household.
Can you identify which terminal?
I'm working on that, but whoever did this was careful to cover their tracks. They used proxy servers and encryption to mask their identity. However, the timing of the access suggests someone who was familiar with the palace's daily routines.
Inspector Mitchell felt the investigation taking a dramatic turn.
If the fraud had been committed from within the palace itself, then the list of suspects was both smaller and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Queen Anne was facing mounting pressure from Parliament, the media, and her own advisors to take decisive action against Lady Camilla. The evening news had been dominated by speculation about royal corruption, and opposition politicians were demanding immediate reforms to royal oversight. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Ashford said during their second emergency meeting in 2 days, the situation is becoming untenable. Lady Westshire must be suspended from all royal duties immediately, and we need to announce a comprehensive review of royal charitable activities.
And if she's innocent, the Queen asked. Then, she can be reinstated quietly once the investigation is complete.
But, right now, every day we delay action costs us credibility with the public. The Queen understood the political calculations, but she also knew that yielding to pressure before the truth was discovered would establish a dangerous precedent. If someone within the royal household was indeed orchestrating attacks on family members, then giving in to this particular assault would only encourage future conspiracies. I want to know who leaked the police evidence to the media, she said firmly. That information was supposed to be confidential during the investigation. I've already initiated an inquiry into the leak, the Prime Minister replied. But focusing on media management won't solve our immediate problem. Our immediate problem, Prime Minister, is that someone is attempting to manipulate us through a carefully orchestrated attack on Lady Westshire. If we react as they expect, we'll be playing directly into their hands. As the Queen and Prime Minister debated strategy, Lady Camilla was following her own investigation leads. Her analysis of the Foundation's donor records had revealed something that chilled her to the bone. Several of the fraudulent payments had been justified by referencing donors who had supposedly requested specific services, but when she contacted these donors directly, none of them had made such requests. More disturbing still, someone had apparently contacted these donors after the fact, claiming to be Foundation representatives conducting follow-up surveys. The donors had been asked detailed questions about their satisfaction with Foundation services and whether they felt their contributions were being used appropriately. Someone was building a narrative, Lady Camilla realized. They were creating evidence of donor dissatisfaction to support the fraud allegations.
This level of planning and attention to detail suggested a conspiracy that went far beyond simple financial fraud.
Someone was attempting to destroy not just Lady Camilla's reputation, but the foundation itself, and possibly the royal family's credibility.
As Lady Camilla delved deeper into the conspiracy, she began to suspect that David Sterling was not working alone.
The coordination required to steal credentials, commit sophisticated fraud, manipulate donor records, and leak police evidence suggested a network of collaborators with access to multiple sensitive systems. Her investigation led her to examine the Foundation's board of directors more carefully. The 12-member board included representatives from various sectors of society, all appointed based on their expertise and commitment to children's welfare. But, as Lady Camilla reviewed their backgrounds, one name stood out: Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, the treasurer who had originally brought the financial irregularities to the Queen's attention. Sir Geoffrey had joined the board 3 years earlier, after a distinguished career in investment banking. His financial expertise had been invaluable in expanding the Foundation's investment portfolio, and his connections in the business community had helped secure major donations. But Lady Camilla now realized that his position also gave him unprecedented access to the Foundation's financial systems and donor information. More troubling still, Sir Geoffrey's appointment to the board had been recommended by Lord Pemberton, the Queen's private secretary. If Sir Geoffrey was involved in the conspiracy, then the network of collaborators reached into the highest levels of the royal household. Lady Camilla felt a growing sense of urgency as the pieces began to fall into place. She had less than 24 hours remaining before the Queen would be forced to take action, and the conspiracy she was uncovering seemed to grow more complex and dangerous with each new discovery. As night fell over Ravenshollow Palace, Lady Camilla prepared for what might be her last chance to expose the truth. She knew that confronting Sir Geoffrey directly would be risky. If he was indeed part of the conspiracy, alerting him to her suspicions could prompt him to destroy evidence or escalate his attacks. But, with time running out and the future of the monarchy hanging in the balance, Lady Camilla knew she had no choice but to take the risk. The next morning would bring either vindication or ruin, and everything depended on her ability to outwit conspirators who had been planning their attack for years. The palace settled into an uneasy quiet as various investigations continued through the night. Inspector Mitchell and her team worked to trace the digital evidence back to its source, while Lady Camilla prepared for a confrontation that would determine not just her own fate, but the future of the royal institution she had served faithfully for so long. Part for the morning of Lady Camilla's deadline dawned grey and threatening, with storm clouds gathering over Ravenshollow Palace like an ominous portent of the confrontation to come. Lady Camilla had spent the night finalizing her evidence against Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, building a case that she hoped would expose the conspiracy before it destroyed everything she held dear. Sir Geoffrey arrived at the Foundation offices precisely at 9 o'clock, as he had for the past 3 years. His reputation for punctuality and attention to detail had made him an invaluable board member, but Lady Camilla now saw these same qualities as evidence of the methodical planning that had characterized the conspiracy against her. "Geoffrey," she called from her office doorway, "could we have a private word?" Sir Geoffrey's expression remained neutral as he entered the office, but Lady Camilla noticed the way his eyes quickly scanned the papers on her desk, as if searching for clues about what she might have discovered. "I've been reviewing the Foundation's security protocols," Lady Camilla began, watching carefully for Sir Geoffrey's reaction, "and I've discovered some troubling irregularities." "Oh? What sort of irregularities?" His voice remained steady, but Lady Camilla caught a slight tension in his shoulders. "Someone has been accessing our systems using Margaret's credentials during times when she was away from the office. The pattern suggests someone with intimate knowledge of our operational schedules." Sir Geoffrey leaned forward with apparent concern. "That's very disturbing. Do you suspect an outside attack on our systems?" "Actually, I believe it was someone with inside access. Someone who knew exactly when our security would be most vulnerable." For just a moment, Sir Geoffrey's composed mask slipped. Lady Camilla saw a flash of something, fear, anger, or perhaps calculation, cross his features before he regained control. "Have you reported this to the police?" he asked. "I'm reporting it to you first, as our treasurer and the person responsible for financial security. I thought you might have insights into how such a breach could have occurred." Sir Geoffrey was quiet for a moment, and Lady Camilla could almost see him weighing his options. Finally, he spoke with apparent reluctance.
Lady Camilla, there's something I need to tell you.
Something I probably should have mentioned earlier.
I'm listening.
Several months ago, I was approached by someone claiming to be from an internal audit division within the Cabinet Office. They said they were conducting a routine review of royal charitable operations and needed access to our financial systems.
Lady Camilla felt her pulse quicken. Someone named David Sterling? Sir Geoffrey's eyes widened in apparent surprise. Yes, exactly. How did you know?
Because he approached Margaret with the same story.
What did you tell him?
I was skeptical at first, but he had impressive credentials and seemed to know details about our operations that only someone with official access could know.
He convinced me that the audit was legitimate and that cooperating would demonstrate our commitment to transparency. And you gave him access to our systems? Not directly.
But I may have inadvertently provided information that could have been used to compromise our security. I shared details about our operational procedures, thinking it was for a legitimate government audit.
Lady Camilla studied Sir Geoffrey's face carefully.
His story was plausible, and his apparent regret seemed genuine. But she knew that skilled conspirators were also skilled actors.
Geoffrey, I need to ask you something directly, and I need an honest answer. Are you involved in any way with the financial irregularities that have emerged?
Sir Geoffrey met her gaze directly. Lady Camilla, I swear to you on my honor that I am not involved in any fraud or conspiracy. If my interactions with this David Sterling character contributed to our security breach, I am deeply sorry, but it was unintentional.
Lady Camilla found herself in a difficult position.
Sir Geoffrey's explanation was believable, but it also meant that the conspiracy was even more sophisticated than she had realized. If both Margaret and Sir Geoffrey had been manipulated by the same person, then David Sterling, or whoever he really was, possessed resources and expertise that went far beyond what she had imagined. Meanwhile, Inspector Mitchell had made a breakthrough in her investigation. The computer forensics team had successfully traced the unauthorized access to a specific terminal within the Palace network, a computer in the office of Lord Pemberton, the Queen's private secretary. This doesn't necessarily mean Lord Pemberton is involved, Dr. Foster explained to Inspector Mitchell.
His office computer could have been compromised, or someone else could have used his terminal during times when he was away.
But it does mean that whoever committed the fraud had access to the highest levels of the royal household, Mitchell replied grimly.
The implications were staggering.
Lord Pemberton had served the royal family faithfully for 15 years, handling the most sensitive aspects of royal administration.
If he was involved in the conspiracy, then no one in the palace could be trusted.
But if he was innocent, then someone with extraordinary skill had managed to compromise the most secure systems in the royal household. Inspector Mitchell knew she needed to approach this development with extreme caution. Accusing the Queen's private secretary without absolute proof would be career suicide, but failing to investigate properly could allow a dangerous conspiracy to continue. As the investigation reached this critical juncture, Queen Anne was facing the most difficult decision of her reign. The 48 hours she had given Lady Camilla were nearly over, and the pressure to take decisive action was becoming overwhelming. Prime Minister Ashford had called an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss the royal crisis, and the mood was grim. Opposition politicians were demanding immediate reforms, the media was calling for transparency, and public confidence in the monarchy was eroding with each passing hour. Your Majesty, the Prime Minister said during their final meeting before the deadline, I understand your desire to protect Lady Westshire, but the political reality is that we cannot afford further delay.
The government's position is becoming untenable. And if she's innocent? If this entire crisis is the result of a deliberate attack on the monarchy? Then, we'll deal with that when the truth emerges.
But right now, we need to demonstrate that royal family members are not above the law. Queen Anne understood the political calculations, but she also sensed that they were all being manipulated by forces they didn't yet understand. The sophisticated nature of the conspiracy, the strategic timing of the leaks, and the pressure for immediate action all suggested that someone was orchestrating events to achieve a specific outcome.
Prime Minister, what if the real goal of this conspiracy is not to destroy Lady Westshire, but to force exactly the kind of immediate action you're recommending? What if we're being manipulated into abandoning due process?
Before the Prime Minister could answer, Lord Pemberton entered with urgent news.
Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but Inspector Mitchell requests an immediate private audience. She says it's a matter of the utmost urgency.
When Inspector Mitchell was shown into the Queen's private study, her expression was grave. Your Majesty, I have information that significantly changes the nature of this investigation.
Proceed.
The computer used to commit the financial fraud has been traced to this palace, specifically, to Lord Pemberton's office.
However, we've also discovered evidence that suggests Lord Pemberton's systems may have been compromised by an external party.
The Queen's eyes flicked to Lord Pemberton, who had gone pale at the mention of his name.
Explain.
The forensic evidence shows sophisticated hacking techniques that would be beyond the capabilities of most individuals. However, the timing and precision of the attacks suggests someone with intimate knowledge of palace operations and security protocols.
Are you suggesting that Lord Pemberton is involved in this conspiracy?
I'm suggesting that someone with extraordinary technical skills and inside knowledge has been using Lord Pemberton's identity and computer access to orchestrate this attack. Whether Lord Pemberton is a willing participant or an unwitting victim remains to be determined. Lord Pemberton stepped forward, his voice shaky but determined.
Your Majesty, I swear to you that I have no knowledge of any conspiracy or financial fraud.
If my computer systems have been compromised, it was without my knowledge or consent. Queen Anne studied her longtime servant carefully. Lord Pemberton had been completely loyal for 15 years, handling the most sensitive royal business with absolute discretion. But she also knew that loyalty could be corrupted and that even the most trusted individuals could harbor hidden agendas.
Inspector Mitchell, what do you recommend?
I recommend that we expand the investigation to examine all access to royal computer systems over the past year. If someone has been conducting sophisticated cyber attacks from within the palace, there may be additional evidence that we haven't yet discovered. As the investigation took this dramatic turn, Lady Camilla was making her own disturbing discovery. Her review of Sir Geoffrey's financial records had revealed a pattern of payments from shell companies that appeared to be connected to the same network used in the foundation fraud. The amounts were small enough to avoid detection during routine financial reviews, but the timing suggested that Sir Geoffrey had been receiving compensation for his cooperation with the conspiracy. Whether he was aware of the true nature of these payments was unclear, but the evidence suggested that he was more deeply involved than his confession had indicated. Lady Camilla realized that she was running out of time and options. The Queen's deadline was only hours away, and the evidence she had gathered was suggestive but not conclusive. She needed something more substantial to prove her innocence and expose the real perpetrators of the conspiracy. Her thoughts were interrupted by Margaret's urgent voice from the outer office.
My lady, there's someone here to see you.
He says he's from the police and that it's urgent. When Lady Camilla emerged from her office, she found Detective Sergeant Crawford waiting with an expression of barely controlled excitement.
Lady Westshire, we've made a breakthrough in the investigation. We need you to come with us immediately.
What kind of breakthrough?
We've identified David Sterling, and we believe he's preparing to flee the country. If we move quickly, we may be able to apprehend him before he disappears.
Lady Camilla felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety.
If David Sterling could be captured and questioned, he might provide the evidence needed to expose the entire conspiracy.
But she also knew that desperate conspirators were dangerous, and that the next few hours would determine whether justice prevailed or whether the carefully planned attack on the monarchy succeeded in achieving its goals. As she prepared to leave the foundation offices, possibly for the last time as their director, Lady Camilla knew that everything she had worked for hung in the balance. The confrontation with David Sterling would either vindicate her or destroy any remaining chance of proving her innocence. The storm that had been brewing over Ravenshollow Palace was about to break, and, when it passed, the monarchy would either emerge stronger or be forever changed by the conspiracy that had shaken it to its very foundations. Part 5. The hunt for David Sterling led Inspector Mitchell's team to a luxury hotel in London's financial district, where surveillance footage had captured a man matching his description checking in under a false name.
As police surrounded the building, Lady Camilla waited anxiously in an unmarked vehicle, knowing that the next few hours would determine her fate.
"The suspect is in room 847, Detective Sergeant Crawford reported through his radio.
Hotel security confirms he's been making numerous phone calls and appears to be preparing to leave."
Inspector Mitchell coordinated the operation from the hotel lobby, her years of experience telling her that they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than a simple fraudster. The sophisticated nature of the conspiracy and the resources required to execute it suggested that David Sterling was either highly trained or working for an organization with significant capabilities. "All units, we're moving in," she commanded. The team approached room 847 with tactical precision, but when they breached the door, they found it empty. David Sterling had vanished, leaving behind only a laptop computer and a collection of forged documents that confirmed the scope of his deception. "He's gone," Crawford reported grimly.
But he left evidence behind. The laptop contained a treasure trove of information that began to unravel the full extent of the conspiracy. Email communications revealed that David Sterling was not working alone. He was part of a network that included individuals within the palace, government officials, and private contractors with expertise in financial fraud and computer hacking. Most shocking of all, the emails revealed the true motivation behind the attack on Lady Camilla.
The conspiracy was not primarily about financial gain, but about destabilizing the monarchy itself. The ultimate goal was to create a crisis that would force Parliament to impose strict new controls on royal finances and activities, effectively reducing the monarchy to a ceremonial role with no real influence. "This was never about Lady Westshire specifically," Dr. Foster explained as she analyzed the laptop's contents. "She was chosen as a target because her charitable work made her particularly vulnerable to financial scandal, and because destroying her reputation would damage public confidence in the entire royal family." Inspector Mitchell felt the pieces of the puzzle finally coming together.
Who was giving Sterling his inside information about palace operations?
The answer came from an encrypted communication found deep in the laptop's files. The emails revealed that Sir Geoffrey Hartwell had indeed been cooperating with the conspiracy, but not in the way Lady Camilla had suspected. Rather than being an unwitting victim, Sir Geoffrey had been receiving payments in exchange for providing detailed information about Foundation operations and royal family activities. But even more shocking was the revelation that Sir Geoffrey was not the highest-level collaborator within the royal household. The emails referenced someone identified only as Palace Guardian who had provided the access codes and scheduling information necessary to compromise Lord Pemberton's computer systems. Palace Guardian has to be someone with extraordinary access to royal security protocols, Inspector Mitchell observed. Someone who would never be suspected of disloyalty. As the police investigation reached this critical juncture, Lady Camilla was experiencing her own revelation. Margaret's detailed account of her interactions with David Sterling had jogged a memory that seemed impossible but increasingly unavoidable. The description Margaret provided of David Sterling, his height, voice, mannerisms, and specific knowledge of palace operations, matched someone Lady Camilla knew well. Someone who had been present at numerous Foundation events, who had access to donor information, and who would never be suspected of betrayal. "Margaret," Lady Camilla said carefully, "when you met with David Sterling, did he ever remove his hat or glasses?"
"No, my lady."
"He always wore both. And he said he was recovering from a medical procedure that made him sensitive to light."
"But you could see his eyes clearly?"
"Yes, they were quite distinctive.
Very pale blue, almost gray."
Lady Camilla felt her blood run cold. She knew only one person with eyes that distinctive, and the implications were staggering. If her suspicions were correct, then the conspiracy reached to the very heart of the royal household, to someone whose betrayal would shock the nation and irreparably damage the monarchy. Lord Pemberton stood in the Queen's private study, his 15 years of loyal service about to be called into question by evidence he couldn't explain. The computer forensics had confirmed that his systems had been used to commit the fraud, but the technical analysis suggested that his computers had been compromised by someone with administrative access to palace security protocols. "Lord Pemberton," Queen said with obvious difficulty, "I need you to account for your whereabouts during the specific times when the fraudulent transactions were committed."
"Your Majesty, I was performing my usual duties."
On most of those dates, I was either in meetings with you or handling correspondence in my office.
Who else has access to your office during your absence?
Only the senior security staff and. Lord Pemberton paused, his face growing pale as he realized the implications of what he was about to say.
And
Sir Reginald Worthington, Your Majesty. As Deputy Private Secretary, he has emergency access to all administrative systems, including mine.
The name hit Queen in like a physical blow.
Sir Reginald Worthington had served the royal family for 23 years, working his way up from junior clerk to one of the most trusted positions in the palace hierarchy. His access to royal schedules, security protocols, and financial information was virtually unlimited, and his reputation for discretion and loyalty had never been questioned.
"Where is Sir Reginald now?" the Queen asked quietly.
"He requested personal leave yesterday, Your Majesty. He said he needed to attend to urgent family matters in Scotland."
Queen Anne and Lord Pemberton exchanged glances, both understanding the implications immediately.
If Sir Reginald was indeed the palace guardian referenced in David Stirling's communications, then his sudden departure was not coincidental.
"Contact the police immediately," Queen Anne commanded.
"And place a security hold on all palace communications systems until we can determine the full extent of any compromise." As the net began to close around the conspiracy's true architects, Lady Camilla was preparing to confront Sir Geoffrey Hartwell with the evidence of his betrayal. The revelation that Sir Reginald Worthington was likely the mastermind behind the plot had answered many questions, but Lady Camilla still needed to understand Sir Geoffrey's role and motivations. She found Sir Geoffrey in the Foundation's conference room, apparently preparing for a board meeting that would never take place. When she presented him with copies of the financial records showing his payments from the conspiracy, his composure finally cracked completely.
"How did you find out?" he asked quietly.
"The police recovered David Stirling's communications.
Everything is documented, Geoffrey.
The payments, the information you provided, the coordination with Sir Reginald."
"I need to understand why."
Sir Geoffrey was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence of his betrayal. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with exhaustion and regret. "They approached me 2 years ago. Not David Stirling initially, but representatives who claimed to be from a government oversight committee. They said that the royal family's charitable activities were being mismanaged and that public funds were being wasted through poor oversight."
"And you believed them?"
"I wanted to believe them. I had grown frustrated with what I saw as wasteful spending on ceremonial functions while the Foundation struggled for resources. They convinced me that providing information about royal charitable activities would lead to better funding and more effective programs." Lady Camilla felt a mixture of anger and pity as she listened to Sir Geoffrey's explanation.
"When did you realize you were part of a conspiracy to destroy the monarchy?"
"When the fraud allegations surfaced. I realized then that the information I had provided was being used to frame you, not to improve charitable oversight."
"But by then, it was too late."
"They had evidence of my cooperation, and they threatened to destroy my reputation if I didn't continue." The confession confirmed what Lady Camilla had suspected, that the conspiracy had recruited collaborators by appealing to their genuine concerns about royal effectiveness, then using their cooperation as leverage to ensure continued participation. As the various investigations converged on the truth, Inspector Mitchell received word that Sir Reginald Worthington had been apprehended at Edinburgh Airport, attempting to board a flight to a country with no extradition treaty. The arrest of such a high-ranking palace official sent shockwaves through the government and royal household. The evidence recovered from Sir Reginald's possession confirmed his role as the palace guardian and revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The plot had been years in the making, carefully planned to exploit vulnerabilities in royal charitable operations while recruiting insider collaborators through a combination of ideological manipulation and financial incentives. Most disturbing of all, the evidence suggested that the attack on Lady Camilla was intended as the first phase of a broader campaign to systematically undermine public confidence in the monarchy. Additional targets had already been identified, and plans were in place to orchestrate similar scandals involving other members of the royal family. Queen Anne received the news of Sir Reginald's arrest with a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The man she had trusted with her most sensitive communications had betrayed not just her personally, but the institution she had devoted her life to serving. Your Majesty, Inspector Mitchell reported during their final meeting, we now have sufficient evidence to clear Lady Westshire of all charges. The investigation has conclusively demonstrated that she was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy, not its perpetrator.
And the broader conspiracy? Have we identified all participants?
We're continuing to investigate, but we believe we've apprehended the principal conspirators. The evidence suggests that the plot was funded by a combination of foreign interests and domestic Republican organizations seeking to undermine the monarchy. As word of Lady Camilla's exoneration spread through the palace, she found herself experiencing a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at being cleared of criminal charges was overshadowed by grief at the damage done to institutions and relationships she had devoted her life to protecting.
The foundation she had built over 10 years lay in ruins, its reputation shattered by allegations that would never be completely forgotten. Donors had withdrawn support, staff had resigned, and the children who depended on foundation programs faced an uncertain future.
But, perhaps most painful of all was the realization that the conspiracy had succeeded in achieving much of its intended damage. Public confidence in royal charitable activities had been severely undermined, and calls for increased oversight and reduced royal influence would likely intensify regardless of Lady Camilla's personal vindication. When Lady Camilla met with Queen Anne for the final time since the crisis began, both women understood that their relationship with the public had been permanently altered by events beyond their control. The monarchy will survive this, Queen Anne said with quiet determination. It has survived far worse crises throughout its long history. But we must learn from this experience and adapt our operations to prevent similar attacks in the future. What will happen to the foundation? Lady Camilla asked. It will be rebuilt, under new leadership and with enhanced security protocols. The work you began will continue, but it will take time to restore public confidence.
And my role in the royal family?
Queen Anne was quiet for a moment, considering the complex realities they both faced. You have been completely exonerated of any wrongdoing, and your loyalty to the crown has never been in question. However, the practical reality is that your effectiveness in public roles may be compromised for some time by the allegations, regardless of their falseness.
Lady Camilla nodded, understanding the unspoken message.
While she had been cleared of criminal charges, the court of public opinion would be slower to render its verdict. The conspiracy had succeeded in making her a liability to the institution she had served faithfully. As she prepared to leave Ravenshollow Palace, possibly for the last time as a working member of the royal household, Lady Camilla reflected on the events that had transformed her life so dramatically. The conspiracy had been defeated, its architects had been brought to justice, and the truth had ultimately prevailed. But the victory felt hollow in the face of the damage that had been done. The foundation's work would be interrupted for months or years, affecting thousands of children who needed help. Public trust in royal institutions had been weakened, providing ammunition for those who sought to diminish or eliminate the monarchy's role in national life. Most troubling of all, the conspiracy had demonstrated how vulnerable even the most secure institutions were to sophisticated attacks from within. If someone like Sir Reginald Worthington could be turned against the monarchy he had served for decades, then no one could be considered completely trustworthy. The storm clouds that had gathered over Ravenshollow Palace were finally beginning to clear, but the landscape they revealed had been permanently altered. Lady Camilla's personal ordeal was over, but the broader struggle for the monarchy's relevance and survival would continue in ways that the conspirators had never intended but had nonetheless helped to accelerate. As she walked through the palace gardens one final time, Lady Camilla knew that the crisis had ended not with a clear victory for either side, but with a complex new reality that would challenge the monarchy's ability to adapt and survive in an era when loyalty could no longer be taken for granted and threats could emerge from the most trusted quarters. The royal turmoil that had begun with financial allegations had evolved into something far more significant, a test of whether ancient institutions could withstand modern forms of warfare waged by enemies who understood that the most effective attacks came not from outside, but from within the walls that were supposed to provide protection. This fictional story explores themes of loyalty, betrayal, and institutional vulnerability through entirely imaginary characters and events. Any resemblance to real persons or situations is purely coincidental.